Date is June 21st, 2019. This is a walkthrough of the Flores trailer. I'm going to go from the back to the front, going to show you what everything is and how it works. So over here we start with the guns and the wands. These are a variable pressure wand. There's a swivel in between the two. This is your variable pressure valve right here. You open this up, it lowers your pressure. Instead of coming out this side, it comes out either side. There is a soap nozzle here. This is a very large nozzle, so this cuts the pressure from the machine. Here you have a quick disconnect for your standard nozzles. There's an O-ring down in here. Over here also you have a quick disconnect on the gun end. There's an O-ring down in here. These are larger. These are 3/8 size. These are a 1/4 inch size. When you're done with the wands, just go ahead and store them right up here. Here's your two 200-gallon tanks. These are connected internally or externally, I'm sorry. You have your garden hose input. There's a float valve on the inside of this, so it'll prevent the tanks from overfilling. You have a 2-inch dump valve right here. Your hose here is on a banjo fitting, so it's easily removed. You can also empty this into another tank if you need to, if you can't dump it for whatever reason. We have your 100 feet of hose that you requested as freestanding hose here. This is a little spare parts kit we put together and give to everybody. You have various fittings in here. These will be for your hoses. These is for your hoses. These actually are for your guns and wands. These will go on the gun. These will go on the end of the wands. This is where the nozzles will go, and this is where your hose will go into. This is a thermal relief valve, or it's also called a pump protector. I will go over this in detail a little more later. And this is a pressure relief valve. Over here in the bin, we have nozzles. These are replacement nozzles. These are also replacement nozzles. These are two separate types of nozzles here. I provide you with the plastic coated nozzles here. These will indicate, or you will use these when you are in single operator mode. If you are in dual operator mode, you are going to use these. These are called meg tips here. These tips perform the same way. I just provide you with them to differentiate between the two forms of operation. It makes it simple. It's a simple visual aid there, so you know I'm operating in single operator mode, I better have a plastic tip on the end of my gun. Or we're operating in dual operation mode, I better have a meg tip on the end of my gun. Now, I don't know how well you can see on the camera here, but these tips, they have numbers on them. For instance, this one says 25060. The first two numbers, such as the 25 here, will indicate the fan pattern, the spray pattern of the nozzle. And in this instance, it's 25 degrees. And the 60 on the end, 60, will indicate the size of the orifice. The size of the orifice here is 60 thousandths. Over here we have a 00060, so that 00 means that's a 0 degree fan pattern. That means it's just going to be a straight on shot, nice high pressure shot. And again, the 60 for the 60 thousandths orifice size. Grabbing one of the meg tips here, we're using these for dual operation mode. You can see here that the orifice size is significantly smaller. In actuality, it's half of what this one is. So these are read exactly the same way, 15030. 15 means a 15 degree spray pattern, and the 30 on the end is the orifice size. So when you're using dual operations mode, each gun has to have a 30 tip in it. Single operation, it will have a 60 tip. So when you're in dual operation mode, you are splitting the flow between two operators. The pressure will stay the same. You will get a constant 3,500 PSI. Instead of 3,500 PSI at 6 gallons a minute, you have 3,500 PSI at 3 gallons a minute per wand. Both of those wands together equal out 6 gallons a minute, which was what you would have in single operation mode. So just be careful when you're using dual operation that you have these tips in there. Make sure you have the proper tips. If you put these tips in, the dual operator tips in for single operations mode, you can cause the unloader to go and bypass. So if you notice, hey, I'm not getting any water out of my machine as a single operator, or there's just some problems where it doesn't feel right, check and make sure you have the right nozzle. This can cause your machine to go into bypass and some other little small issues. So just make sure you always have the right nozzle. Real simple. Also include some Teflon tape. When you get the unit, there will be a small USB drive in one of these. It will have pictures of your unit as it was built. There will also be a video like I'm recording now that goes through everything. There's also an operations video, so in case you get lost, you can just easily refer to the video and see how everything operates. Also in here you have some O-rings. These are the O-rings for the quick disconnects on the end of the gun. These are the O-rings for the quick disconnects for the nozzle side of the gun. If you notice you have a leak at either one of these outlets, check your O-ring. These will deteriorate over time. They get brittle, dry up, crack, cause leaks. Sometimes they just get so dry and nasty that they fall out altogether. Over here you have your downstream chemical injector. This will be used on the end of the hose right before the gun. You'll simply plug it into your gun, plug your hose in down here, dump this in your bucket of chemical, go ahead and open this all the way up. Pressure will come down to 500 psi. You'll start siphoning soap through the tubing here, and then just go about cleaning. When you're done, go ahead, tilt this back, pull this out of your chemical, flush whatever chemical you might have in your line, and you're good to go. I will caution you, these pieces are pretty temperamental. We stopped offering them at one time. Some people like to use them. I get calls all the time from people that have problems with them, so I'm warning you now. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. We provide it this way. This is the best chance of it working. The longer the amount of hose you get, the more back pressure you have, you may end up with some problems trying to siphon chemical through these. So buyer beware. Just something I want to let you know about. You got your 2 tanks here. They're ratchet strapped down. Straps shouldn't come loose, but check these about once a month just to make sure everything is cool and good to go with them. Over here we have our hose reels. These hose reels have a lock on them. You have to unlock them, pull out however much hose you want. When you get out your hose, I need you to come back here and lock these in place. If you do not lock these will shock every time you let on and off the trigger. It will cause this whole thing just to shake, and then you'll have a mess of hose here. Your handles here are on, of course I can't, a set screw here, so they swivel out of the way. Just set them back when you're done with them. If you need to use it, come over here, let it out. Grab your set screw there, you're good to go. The hose here, you have a blue jumper hose, comes in the bottom, splits between either one of these hose reels. These are on quick disconnects. There are O-rings up in here like you have on your gun and wand. It's the same premise, so if you see a leak over here, check the O-rings. If they need to be replaced, go ahead and give them a replacement. You have high pressure swivels on either end of each hose reel. These can be rebuilt with O-rings. It's easier just to purchase new ones and put the new ones in. There's a mess of little ball bearings and some other needle bearings and some O-rings in there. It's very time consuming to fix. I err on the side of time here, and we normally just replace them. So we don't provide parts for those. If you feel you want to, you can tinker with this, pull it apart, take it down to the hardware store, match up an O-ring, but I suggest, for time's sake, just replacing them. Okay, we're gonna travel up front. So we have the front tank here. This is where you're drawing your water from here. Water comes out of the tank, comes out of the valve here. Normal operation, this means the valve's open. You have a filter mesh screen in here. This is an 80 mesh screen. Go ahead and turn this off. You can open this up, pull this filter out, check it before every job. This will trap any large debris from getting past and into the machine. Some pretty fine debris actually too also. Just make sure you check this. If there's crap on there, it can slime up, it can just get nasty, and it will choke the machine, not allow the water to get through. So again, normal operation, this is open. This is the bypass line. This comes from the machine when the machine is in bypass mode, and the water comes back into the feed tank here. The blue hose here is the jumper hose that comes from the output of the machine and goes back to your hose reel. You'll see this is a little long here, so we leave this in case you just want to use one hose reel at a time. which is fine. You can just pull this out and set this in whichever hose reel you want to use, because that's all on a quick disconnect. I recommend just leaving it like this, hooking up both of your guns to either hose reel, and then if you only need one, just pull one out and use one. So the water comes out of here, out of this piece of tubing here, comes into your three-way valve. This valve determines which direction the water goes, or which direction the water is pulled from the machine. Normal operation, this is in the vertical position, which means you're pulling from this side of the valve or the tank. For priming, you will hook a garden hose up in here. You will have another video, an operations video, that shows you how to prime the system. It is also on the wall right here, also in your owner's manual, and I highly suggest when you get the machine home, read the owner's manual, read the little cheat sheet on the side of the door there. It tells you everything you need to know. So water comes in here, comes out of this hose, goes into the pump, comes out of the pump, pressurized, comes into the unloader, out of the unloader, into the coil, out of the coil, out of the blue hose, out to your hose reels, and then out to your guns, and that's the water circuit there. You put this in the horizontal position here, and it is pulling from this tank. The only time you're going to need this tank is if you have a problem with your tanks here. Of course, then I suggest just feeding it directly with a garden hose. If you have a garden hose that doesn't quite offer 6 gallons a minute of flow, you can hook up to this tank and use there's 2 gallons here, you can use it as a buffer. This will also be used for winterization. I suggest only using it for that. If you have a problem with your tank, I suggest just running the garden hose straight into here and doing it that way. So again, this is a normal operation mode. Your valve from the tank is also going to be open. Horizontal, it means it's going to pull from this tank, which we will only be using for winterizing. Winterizing is also covered in the other video. So we'll go ahead and throw this back up in the normal operation mode. I'm going to talk to you about your unloader here. What the unloader does is when you don't have the trigger pulled, there's no flow going through the system, the water needs a place to go, otherwise it will deadhead the pump and explode it basically. So what happens is when you let off that trigger, there's a small passageway in here, that pressurized water comes up into here, pushes down a spring, water comes, that pressurized water, instead of going through here and being stuck, comes out here, goes into the bypass. Here you will see when I was back there showing you the contents of your spare parts kit, there was what I called a pump protector or a thermal relief valve. That's what this is here. The one we provide you looks a little different. Don't worry about that. They all perform exactly the same function. So what happens is when these come from the factory, you see them just kind of like this. Forget this valves here. That bypass water comes out and goes right back into the low pressure side of the pump and just continues to make a loop, high pressure to low pressure, high pressure to low pressure. While it's doing that, it's heating up. The water is getting hot. If this water gets too hot, it can actually damage the seals on the inside of the pump, or it can warp the head of the pump. So this pump protector will do exactly what its name says. It will open up here, it'll dump some of that hot water off, and it'll allow that water to cool down enough to where it doesn't do any damage. We take that one step further. We add in this secondary bypass valve here. So under normal operation, it's going to bypass all this stuff. That water is going to come out of here on the bypass side. It's going to go through this red hose, come back here into the tank, into this nice big heat sink. So any chance this thing had to absorb any heat, it's all going to get taken away by the water tank here. So you should not have to worry about that. Again, under normal operations, this valve is open. You will close this valve for priming. You will close this valve for winterizing. That's the only time you should ever have it closed. Correction. If you are feeding the machine with a garden hose, this will also be closed. Otherwise, when the machine goes into bypass, that water is going to dump here into this tank, which you do not want it to do. Back to the thermal relief valve, there is some spring steel in here. So over time, this will rust and corrode. It can get some debris in there. It will in effect die over time. It wears out. If you notice this start leaking, go ahead and replace this. It can suck some air. It will cause some pressure issues, some pulsation. So just something to be aware of if you have that problem. You can bypass or put a plug in here. If you're in a pinch somewhere, you don't have one of these and this one takes a crap, you can put a plug in here, I suggest replacing it as soon as you get back to your get back to your shop or wherever that you can. I wouldn't run it without that for long, just as a safety precaution. Again, this is your unloader here. You only have to touch this if you are using the steam operation. Otherwise, just leave this where it's at. If you have a pressure problem, the only time there's going to be a problem with this is if something malfunctions or somebody was using the steam and forgot to set it back where it goes. This is set at the factory. You'll see I'm turning it counterclockwise here. That will lessen the pressure and the spike. You're going to want to turn this all the way out when you are using the steam. Operation of that is covered in the other video. Aside from that, you're just going to come over here and you're going to tighten this clockwise until it hits the stop. Boom, hits the stop. There's no need to crank on it extra hard. You just run the risk of breaking stuff. Don't come in here and try and mess with some of this stuff. You can and will void your warranty. We will know if this has been tampered with, so just something for you to be thinking of. Over here you have two pressure switches. One of these pressure switches activates the heat for the burner.